chance of competing against Gulch Trotters. So gentlemen, we're starting things out in Darkheart Thicket, obviously a map we saw a ton of in 2017. Let's see what happens.
Sarahs, we finally get to cast together. Really excited here. Now, we didn't mention, of course, at the beginning of this, we are heading now into a 24, and not just any 24, but a tyrannical setting in the Darkheart Thicket. Really scary for some of the bosses coming up, especially as we get to Shade, Oakheart, and Restaurant. But starting off things here, we do see a big pull coming out of both teams, similar with that kind of 7-pack of the Owls and the Cats, and that one Bear as well, Sours.
Yeah, you know, you have to be careful on these pulls, especially with those explosive orbs. If they start going off, we have been talking about it a lot, it can become a very grisly situation. And, you know, the Sanguine Puddles are also really scary. If you take a little bit of a bath in blood, these mobs are going to heal all the way back up to the full health potentially, and that could set you back a huge amount, especially now that these mobs have so much more health than the 24. Really cool Shroud coming out of free pumps here. They're going ahead. They've got, this is a very cool route from these guys. Yeah,
you know, a skip we saw today in some of the other NA teams with this kind of stealth after that first pull. Not surprised to see this. They will put these 4 mobs together after skipping the 2 bears ahead of themselves. And if I'm not mistaken, rather bear pun from you there earlier. Well done here. You're picking up by the family here. Gulch Trotters opting to go a more kind of side pull route, getting some of that trash percentage done nice and early so that they can have likely longer skip in Shade of Xavius' log. We'll talk about that one when we get there. But free pumps opting to skip the bears on the side, as we discussed earlier. No death on the board from them because the rogue is the one that skips it, does that stealth as he pulls to the side, and we're now looking at Gladalis for free pumps.
Yeah, of course, free pumps has barely pulled anything here, only 13% kill count. Now there is a lot of kill count to be made up near the end of the dungeon, especially around that log. We have seen a couple of teams opt to, instead of jumping into the log, they'll walk around it and grab. There's a nice pack of bats over there as well as a couple of casters, and that's where you can make up kill count. And you know, that 13% versus 27%, right now the biggest thing is that how much of this boss health percentage ahead they are.
Yeah, and I'm liking seeing the positioning here from from free pumps on Gladalis as well. Also getting kind of his back to that stone pillar there. Similar things that I did live. Miscalculated the angle just a bit there, but the name of the game is you don't want Gladalis charging too far after he does that frontal bear punt. You want him charging into a close object, in this case, that stone wall there. Now they lose obviously a very minor percent of DPS uptime with the DK not getting clipped fully on that wall, but really well positioned here by them. The small ads are spawning on the side, making sure to babysit those explosives. Big damage coming in on the rogue. I think he unfortunately stepped in some of that goop on the ground. Want to make sure you avoid that, but free pumps looking good here, already down to 50%. Gulch Trotters, of course, behind on the boss understandably, as there is a 14% trash difference between the two teams.
Yeah, so of course there's a lot of time to be made up later in the dungeon, and you know they do have that 14% additional trash, but how efficient was that trash percentage compared to the skips that free pumps has made in order to pull this boss early? It is nice, of course, to have these paladins here to take the jumps from Gladalis, as they will take significantly reduced damage from that Devo or a Talent.
Yeah, and you know, a fair bit, and it is important to talk about the mechanics of some of these bosses, especially in this tyrannical setting. We do have 2 cat forms. Gladalis, we see there at the cat, as the cat gets out of the bag, jumps over onto the Holy Paladin and applies that Grievous Wound, similar to the affix that we're used to seeing. You want to make sure you heal above that 90% threshold, getting rid of that bleed. And for every 2 cat forms, we do have that bear form, which we discussed slightly earlier, getting the punt on the tank, running into the wall. But also, Sours, you know, as much as we don't like to focus on it, these abominations that spawn on the ground are actually extremely lethal with the kind of residue that they leave on the ground.
Yeah, you know, any ground residue is something you want to avoid at all costs. And if a residue spawns on you and you decide that you want to finish your cast, you will find that you can actually not finish your cast because you're going to be on the ground bathing in that residue. You know, once they kill this guy, this isn't going to happen anymore, but there are still a couple of other floor effects to watch out for. Doing a really good job of killing those. You know, we did see, of course, this poor rogue on free pumps get chunked by it, but he did not proc cheat death, so he's still feeling nice and healthy.
Free pumps now kind of getting their one and only checkpoint to the dungeon, the only other one being, of course, at the start of the dungeon. But once Gladalis falls, you do have that checkpoint that you can fall back on. Hopefully they won't need to. Pulling the standard pack here, and this is where the dungeon really starts to, well, actually not really open up, but it continues to remain open in terms of what trash we skip, what trash we opt to pull. We do see a lot of teams opting to not deal with the double keeper pack coming up. Bit of a death here for Sups ahead as he moves ahead of the group and gets that repentance on the Dryad on the side there.
Yeah, so they decided that they want some special way of handling the kill count here. It appears that by bringing that mob out and repentancing it, they are able to clear up all of the trash in that little cubby be there without having to worry about him healing up his flower friends. Now, if he is around flowers, he will heal them for a significant amount of health, you know, even more so than these sanguine puddles will. So they did trade 1 death for this, but that checkpoint is just around the corner. So by doing so, they are able to engage this trash pool with the previous one, and it is looking really efficient and really smart from Free Pumps.
Yeah, I mean, really interesting pull here. The Druids, excuse me, the Keepers rather, do have a lot of that flower power, getting, I think it's 5% per second, something like that on the Blossoms, especially in this 24 setting, even in the non-fortified, the Tyrannical setting that we have here. It does do a ton of healing. Want to make sure you get out of that aura range. The Keeper does now lose that Repentance CC that we saw earlier that Subs did, runs back to his original position and just ends up with a very easy skip for the rest of the team. I do expect, Cyrus, here that we'll see the typical pull coming in, where we see this patrol plus some of the flowers behind the house being pulled, after which the 2 Keepers will be skipped.
Yeah, so they've done a nice job here grabbing this patrol and bringing it into a corner. They've got, you know, the Keeper here shouldn't disengage too far, and they've got a couple flowers, and there's a few more hiding behind the house, and there is, of course, the double Keeper pull there with those flowers. But what a lot of people don't actually know about that one is that if you can pull the Keepers away from the trash without engaging the flowers, which will then allow you to take the flowers that are hanging out over there with the patrol that goes up and down between these guys and Oakheart.
Right, you are, Sour. So they're just ending up with the last of the Blossoms. We do have that LOH go up on the Blood DK there. Bit of a freak out moment for Subs, but just wants to make sure that we don't have any extra deaths outside of the intended one that they've had so far. Now, these Blossoms do hit quite hard after a while. You want to make sure you don't get caught in the AoE on the ground. The team now rearing up on the left side here, getting ready to do the skip, leading down to Oakheart's area. Gulch Trotters, of course, we haven't forgotten about them on the side, dealing with the similar flower pull that ended up from behind the house as they slowly tried to backpedal out of these flowers sanguine on the ground.
And you never want to underestimate that flower power. You know, Free Pumps is doing a nice job heading on over towards Oakheart. They have, of course, pulled those healing friends off to the side, and they've engaged these 5 mobs here together. Now, they don't want to bring them down with the rest of it because these mobs have fairly low health compared to those GUIs below, and that Sanguine Puddle could heal everything up. They're, by just playing nice and safe here, they are a little bit ahead, but Gulch Trotters, is actually, maybe not as behind as we think. They did kill the boss a little bit slower, but the trash percentage is evening out now, and they're actually, like, these guys are standing right next to each other.
Yeah, I mean, that is something we'll have to watch out for at the end of the dungeon, but we do have a death go down over on Gulch Trotters right now as the healer goes down, opting not to use that res, trying to finish the rest of this pack without it. Skipping back here to where Gulch Trotters is right now would be an absolute nightmare. The DK can take care of themselves. It's really just on the rest of the team to make sure that they avoid a lot of the kind of spikes that come out from the flowers and, of course, killing those explosives. We now see Free Pumps on the right side of the screen pulling the 5 dwellers, the 5 GUIs as we like to call them. Important to note about these mobs is that they do cast a channeled effect on players as we see that Tormenting Eye. That needs to be interrupted immediately, not towards the end, because not only does it pulse damage as it's cast, but if it gets the full cast off, it will nuke the player for a bit of damage and also at 5-second fear.
Yeah, so they're doing a nice job here. They got a Blood Elf Silence off on that first one, rest in peace. And then they have a couple other things available. They have a Leg Sweep and more Blood Elf Silences able to handle these mobs. And then they just have to get into Oakheart, where things can get a little bit hairy. But, these guys have been looking pretty tough, and they should be able to handle it.
Hairy indeed, but I wouldn't know anything about that, unfortunately. Oakheart now spawning here as the 5 dwellers have been down. Now, this boss is really dangerous because it has, it's just, it's one of those bosses you think about Tyrannical. It's really scary. The AoE Stomp is one thing that comes to mind. A lot of damage. Wouldn't be surprised if some of these players were wearing Pridus or some kind of defensive legendary or gear associated with it. Handle that one quite well. Nobody dips too low. The other 30-second cycle ability that we have to watch out for is that Crushing Grip on the tank. Now, as a Blood DK, you do have frequent access to your tools to deal with this. You should have Vamp Blood for everyone and AMS for every other, but it is a huge amount of damage that you're going to need to pump into that tank.
Yeah,
amount of healing, excuse me.
Something also cool is we see Subs doing some insane Holy Paladin damage. They're now only just now falling behind, and both of these teams are running the Holy Paladin here, and that Blessing of Freedom is going to allow you to clear up these routes really well. Some teams will opt to leave these up for either the Warlocks to gain resources off of, or perhaps for Rogues or other classes allows to have mobs spawn.
Or a Shadow Priest.
Or a Shadow Priest even. If somebody, you know, tricks you into bringing their Shadow Priest to one of these dungeons, you might want to leave those up for them. But, you know, hopefully no one's going to be that foolish and bring one along with them. They're doing a really good job, of course, clearing up Oakheart. Free Pumps pulling just a little bit ahead again. Both teams are engaged, you know, only one death apiece. Lust is coming up very shortly for both of these guys. You know, this is looking still very close. Now, they did pull very differently coming up to here, but both teams coming up very close on percent.
Yeah, I mean, there's only a 6% difference between them. That's only one really pack more by the time we get to the log before State of Xavius that we'll see when we get there. But Free Pumps about 15% ahead of Gulch Trotters right now with Oakheart. Oakheart has a lot of health in this tyrannical setting. I really wouldn't be surprised to see Bloodlust be popped out here and maybe have it again accessible for Shade of Xavius, as we do see Free Pumps immediately get that Bloodlust going with Oakheart at 38%. You know, I really like their strat here. We saw this from a couple of the NA teams earlier on Darkheart as well. Just that a really nice, tight, compact group. As soon as those roots come down, everybody spreads out except for that Holy Paladin who pops Blessing of Freedom, Hand of Freedom on themselves. Roots get cleared up and cleaved down immediately, and everything's nice and clean. Don't have to deal with too many extra explosives.
And of course, here on the 25 tyrannical setting, these bosses are taking a significant increased amount of time in order to be dealt with. They're not too scary. We do see the stomp goes out. It looks quite spooky. These guys get knocked down to very low health, but as long as their healers are doing a good job keeping them topped, nobody is ever really at a lot of threat of dying unless explosive spawns and gets a little bit out of control. Oakheart falling very shortly for Free Pumps. Just a couple of pools remaining for them in the dungeon, and they're heading towards a very scary dragon as well. I mean,
if Free Pumps chopped him down to size really quickly, they had about a 15% difference from Gulch Trotters, spread that to about 22-23% by the time the boss was finished off. Potentially some execute coming in from their Warlock as they move up and pull a lot of those small globules, the gooeys, along with the Blood-Tainted Fury. Now, notable on this mob, of course, is that he does split into 4 lesser Furies when you kill him, which do not award percentage, and they themselves do a cast that you want to interrupt, otherwise they transform into larger Furies too. So the name of the game here is to get the Blood-Tainted Fury low, stun it, and run away to make sure that nobody proximity aggroes the 4 smaller mobs that spawn from it.
Additionally, these Furies are going to have a pretty scary charge that if you get hit by it, can knock you into a lot of the eggs that are in the room. And now it's important that if you don't want to deal with the charge, is that you actually let it go off slightly and then stun it, as opposed to stunning before the charge goes off. That way the mob does not cast it again. They've got a really nice patrol here on the second Fury standing over in a corner. It appears Free Pumps is opting to actually kill it with the slimes. Very dangerous, an interesting choice by them. You know, they have to watch out, because if he stands in that Sanguine Puddle for even a second, that's all going to tick on him instantly, bringing it straight back to full, but very well handled by them.
Yeah, I mean, you know, really typically we see from almost all teams is that they skip this second Fury, whether it be with a root or just waiting for it to patrol away and then you run away. But Free Pumps has already done a couple of unconventional things, as we saw with that first Keeper pulling it to the side. So they know they look like they're well versed in this dungeon. They know exactly what they need to do for the percent that they need. 14% left on the board for them after they deal with Dressron. Dressron, you know, packs quite a punch in this 24 tyrannical setting. 3 main abilities to look out for. It does have a Frontal Breath on the tank, or will actually target the nearest melee player with the highest threat if the tank is out of melee range when that cast starts. Has also that wind pushback that you want to be as close to the center of the hitbox as possible. And finally, Sours, we do know there is that cave in that players need to bait away as to not kind of deny that area under the boss that players importantly need to use for that wind pushback.
Yeah, so that wind pushback is really scary, and we see Free Pumps, of course, has the Rogue. The Rogue in here in Darkheart Thicket was the highlight for a lot of teams in the last Mythic Dungeon Invitational, and you can see him doing an absurd amount of damage to the boss thanks to those combo points available from the dragons. Also, these dragons are going to help the Death Knight do increased damage as well as healing, and you know, maybe even with Tear Set and Bone Shield, how's that like as a Death Knight?
I mean, it's, you know, he's probably not wearing 4-piece. You do get that 3-second reduction every 2-second ICD, of course, from your Bone Shield. So you're getting more frequent access to your Dancing Rune Weapon, 3-minute baseline CD. You can, you know, with these chain pulling in these dungeons, you can likely whittle it down to about minute and a half. Okay, minute's a bit excessive, but about minute and a half CD. So you do have a lot of that damage coming in, and he's able to proc a lot of those Bone Shield stacks during times when the boss is not actively meleeing him, such as the wind pushback or the cave-in, which the boss spends a significant time doing on this fight. So we'll have access to that DRW. Oh, so nice of you. Ask the tanks question. I wish Jack would do that once in a while too. Dressron now down to 44% on Free Pump side, but not far behind is Gulch Trotters. Keep in mind though, they were able to close that percentage on the boss, Sours, because they did not kill that second Blood-Tainted Fury that we said most teams don't.
Yeah, so you know, there is still that small kill count differential between these two teams, but Free Pumps does have that Rogue Shroud available, as well as they should have another round of Invis Potions. Of course, there has been a significant amount of time. They haven't even used an Invis Potion. As long as they don't use a combat pot here or in the next few pools, they don't have to worry about any of that. You know, this looks like a well-coordinated and well-practiced dungeon from Free Pumps. You know, where was this team in the previous series? You know, they've really reset, and this dungeon is one difficulty higher, but they're playing it so much better than they did in those 23s.
Yeah, I mean, they're looking really solid. Both of them are here. It's going to be a really, really close finish coming up. Now, it's all going to be, all eyes are really going to be on Shade of Savius. We'll discuss that boss when we get there, but that is one scary boss. That's one of those bosses that you think about on that Tyrannical setting, up there with Melandris, or at least Melandris back in the day. Think about the high Tyrannical, it's just way too much damage for players to deal with. That's where you're going to see a lot of players busting out. You know, maybe even some players actually switch to a Stand Flask. You do see, of course, Pride is coming in on some players. You just want to make sure you're surviving those really capable one-hit potential abilities from the boss. But first, we do have to deal with the trash, 14% more for Free Pumps. The restaurant just now at 18% for Gulch Trotters, so they're still playing a bit of catch-up. They do have that 3% advantage from the trash, but it's not enough to make up for the 18% of boss that they have to do.
Yeah, unfortunately, Free Pumps has jumped out of this tree, and they have a bit of an unlucky patrol here. They have to wait a little bit of time for it to get nice and close so that they can grip everything smoothly. With a lot of these caster mobs, that even potentially have more than one spell school. Kicking them and getting them to be stacked up nicely can be quite tedious. So by being a little bit patient there and letting the patrol get nice and close, they're able to do this combined pool much more quickly, and this should be just about kill count. Maybe they just have to kill the bats, and then once they handle that, they just have to get past that last trash pack nice and cleanly, and then Free Pumps is looking really, really good here.
Likely will be using that mass stealth, but you're absolutely right. They do need to kill these 4 bats first. Of course, those Blood Elf Rangers, once again, we keep joking about it, but they came in great handy on the pack they just did, making sure to lock out a lot of those Shadow Bolts and Dread Infernos. The bats here, a fair bit of damage coming in on the tank, including a disease that leeches a small amount of health back onto them. Can be dispelled, of course, by that Paladin, but nothing too substantial, and the main source of the damage really is the melee here from the Bloodseekers. Should be no problem for them to clean up, after which we will expect to see that mass stealth from the Rogue with the Sap on the leftmost bat, making sure none of them accidentally aggro. We're seeing the Solar Beam come down here for Gulch Trotters on the left side with a similar dangerous pull. I think the bats are actually in for Gulch Trotters as well, so they're kind of trying to pull everything together, play a bit of catch-up here, and then do the skip at the end as well.
You know, this is, you know, something that's really good to see out of Gulch Trotters. Maybe they had this plan, maybe they didn't, but they did a really big pull here, and this could actually put them neck and neck. Both teams still 1 death apiece. You know, this trash is ending just a second apart. There will be a story of single target on the final boss. Now, Free Pumps will, of course, have that potion available, as they do have the Shroud to skip, whereas Gulch Trotters is going to need to use this Scagly Drink or Invisibility Potion to skip that last trash pack.
You know, and if the other bosses were any information, Free Pumps actually has the superior single target damage. Of course, there was extra advantage on Dressron with that Rogue building up those combo points as well. Not an advantage we'll see here, but we have to execute coming in from the Warlock as needed. But the race is on between the two teams. We do not have Bloodlust available for either one of them. Neck and neck right now, 1 death apiece. It's really going to come down, Sours, to is anybody going to die from any of the one-shot abilities? Nightmare Bolts go out. Add a pacification area to the player. Anybody not stand, if you're not having anyone stand within that pacification zone for 20 seconds, you will be locked out. That has huge one-shot potential. There's dispels that need to go out. There's a channeled spell as well that does a ton of damage that the healer needs to chain heal into. You want a bit of support during that. And of course, here we do see the Paranoia. Anybody entering this kind of goo zone will end up fearing and nuking that person. But Sours, probably the most dangerous, especially in this 24 setting, is that 50% mark.
Yeah, once the boss transitions to 50%, he's going to do increased damage, and he's also going to be raining down Hellfire and Brimstone all around him. And if he stands in one of those puddles, he will do increased damage, which will make all of his one-shots even more of a one-shot ability. And, you know, as long as these players are staying nice and healthy at full health, perhaps they've got on lots of Verse or Pride, as you know, you got to watch out. These abilities can chunk. And if you see somebody get chunked super, super low, once that boss transitions, that difference between being on low health versus being dead, it could be gone, and they could just be dead.
Right, you are, without a shade of a doubt on this boss. A lot of dangerous damage coming in. Chompy doing really well there to get into that bear form right before that Nightmare Bolt hits. Otherwise, it definitely would have one-shot him. Now, there is one thing we failed to mention. At 50%, all of the boss's first phase abilities are still there, but with that Brimstone falling around, the players, of course, want to avoid it for extra damage, but any that connects with the boss's hitbox, which is much bigger than you think, will give him a damage stack buff of 5%, stacking up to 10 times. So all these abilities that you're seeing almost one-shot the players could very much have full potential one-shot ability if they get some unfortunate swirly spawns. You can move the boss out of them, but there's a reason why these players are playing the boss into the side of the room here.
Yeah, you know, you want to try to keep the boss in a place where there's as little chance of a swirly spawning on him as possible. Having him next to the wall means that there's a much, like, you could think of it being a full circle around the boss if they were standing in the middle of the room, but of course now it's only half a circle standing here against the wall. And even if you did try to move him out of all the swirlies, if the boss decides that, you know what, I'm going to stand here and cast a spell right now, then no matter your best efforts, he is going to get that buff, and that, you know, that, like we said, we haven't seen anybody die here, or it looks like Chompy got so
Where's Chompy? Just getting every nightmare pulled.
Right? You know, you don't want to be that guy. If one person gets targeted over and over again by abilities, you know, they may very well just run out of defensive utilities options available to them, and they could die.
I mean, it's looking really favorable for Free Pumps right now. We alluded to this right before they pulled the boss, and Free Pumps is just pulling further and further ahead on that single target damage. 12% difference between two teams now. Death differential, no point talking about it because both teams are sitting at 1 apiece. And if things don't change, as Free Pumps gets earlier access to their Bloodlust because they got to that boss first, I mean, it's looking like it's going to be Free Pumps' game here, Sours.
You know, yeah, exactly. But there is a death, or no, Chompy, you know, how does he keep staying alive? This guy gets so low every time, just barely making it. Free Pumps playing so cleanly, you know, having a nice run out of this guy's. There was, of course, a cheat death proc on that rogue, but he is okay. They didn't incur the extra time, and this first map is theirs.
Free Pumps able to shrug off the loss and just go ahead and get this win in the series. And we were talking about it. You have to come in with a fresh mentality, a fresh approach. You have to dust off what just happened to you at the hands of Free Marcy, and you got to get back into the game and focus on that map. That's exactly what they've done here. It's yielding dividends. They're currently up 1-0 in this series.
They really want to Free Pumps.
I mean, at Marcy really wanted to be freed before. That's the theme in Asia Pacific. If you want to be a dominant team, just
someone needs to go to jail.
You need to be fighting for someone.
I mean, you're absolutely right, Rob. Really dominant performance. And you could tell that this is a map, and, you know, Sours and I were commenting during the map on this. You could tell this is a map that Free Pumps really kind of well-practiced, well-rehearsed. They did even the small things that were both kind of like, oh, that's weird. We don't usually see that. The pull with the Keeper to the side, the Repentance on the side. We had the second Blood-Tainted Fury being pulled. Not a huge deal. And when they pulled it, we're like, was this a mistake? Because we just don't see teams doing this. But they just went right through it like butter, no problem.
Right, and we talked about coming into this. Gulch Trotters definitely seems like a team that you cannot take lightly. I like the fact that these two teams are battling for that final spot, and they both seem really evenly matched. As much as Free Pumps looked very dominant and did win that, it was not by a wide margin. And as we go into the second map, you really, if you're Free Pumps, you can't walk away and say, okay, we've clearly got this series. Gulch Trotters certainly is going to have tricks up their sleeve, Sours.
Yeah, you know, it could be anyone's game still. You know, these guys are quite sneaky. You know, some might even call Tech a bit of a snake. You know, that guy, he's really, you know, they've got some crazy strats in store for these upcoming dungeons, without a doubt. They could easily pull a win out of the next game. It is their map pick. Where they go, you know, who knows, right? But these guys are not someone that you should take lightly. They have the ability to claim this victory.
Absolutely, and I just want to say, Salute, obviously we've done MDI for a while now, but the growth from this kid when it comes to banter, when it comes to puns, we are both so proud of you, Sours. You're making great progress, just as these two Asia-Pacific teams are, but we're going to take a short break. When we come back, Free Pump's going to look to tie this up 2-0, but Gulch Trotters certainly going to have something to say about it. Let's see what happens on the other side of this break. Free Pump's in the driver's seat, but they're going to have to get through a second map here with Gulch Trotters. They're going to have to take that W if they want to move on to Global Land. This is super exciting, guys. This is being in that spot where you're one map away. I mean, again, yeah, they're going into Free Marcy, which absolutely is the buzzsaw I don't think anybody wants to be going in the direction of, but they definitely are feeling it. They are so close to making it to the Global Land.
It's just getting across that first finish line, getting it to the LAN, and at that point, I think it's just going to be a huge celebration for them. You know, they're in the top 2, they've qualified, but first, I mean, Gulch Trotters is not going to go out without a fight.
Yeah, and they're going to have to win it on lower Karazhan now with the Necrotic Affix. As we've kind of talked about over the course of this tournament, that is kind of the standard Affix there in that 3rd spot for teams who are making it through the bracket. So, Sours, do you think they went with something standard just because it's something they've practiced, or do they expect Free Pumps to be tripped up by the Necrotic Affix?
You know, you never know when a team takes another team to a dungeon that's been seen so many times, especially when one is a pre-assigned Affix. You know, both teams have practiced this map. This map, and I believe even with this combo, is something that is in the tournament prior to here. So by picking this map, they're saying, hey, we're better at you at this map. We put in more time to practice it, so we're going to be faster. But now they have to prove it. And if they can prove whether or not they're faster, you know, they could go home or they could live on for one more series, depending on if they can show that or not.
And they have to prove it on a 24 now, because usually it's a 22 in the forced map pool that they're seeing.
Absolutely worth noting. Lower Karazhan is a map full of its own pitfalls. Certainly when you get Necrotic in the mix with some of that trash that cannot be slowed, cannot be CC'd, that's where things can absolutely get ugly. But we're going to hop into the game again. Gulch Trotters need to get this win to stay alive. If they do not, Free Pumps moving on to the first ever Mythic Dungeon Invitational Global Land.
So right away, Sours, we're definitely going to see that Control Undead coming out of those 2 Blood DKs with those Forlorn Spirits coming up. I would expect at least. And then, you know, I've seen a lot of direction for the teams, a lot of the teams over the weeks and even on live servers on what kind of their strategy they implement going up to this balcony, how exactly they will kill the spirits. We'll have to see from both teams if they have to kill most of the trash, none of the trash. But the name of the game for both teams is really we want to start the RP on the Opera event as quickly as possible.
So, yeah, so whether or not teams decide that they want to get some kill count here or do a suicide and mass res, we'll have to see. Gulch Trotters is doing a pretty nice AoE pool over here on the left. It looks like they are committed to killing this trash. Maybe then they've got a lot to clear below. Well, Free Pumps is doing some sort of death run. I don't know if they've quite made it far enough. I don't know if this is where you want to be right now as Free Pumps. That doesn't look intentional, especially with a release like that.
Yeah, I'm not sure that was a purposeful death run as much, because we did see them immediately res up, so it's not like the healer got too far. We are seeing the death intended this time on Gulch Trotter's side. They do kill 5% of that trash. Dag has indeed started the RP over on the Opera event, reses everyone up, drops that sugar-crusted fish feast immediately. Everyone eats up the disgusting fish feast and gets ready to pull some of the remaining trash while effectively the RP for Opera is still happening. So it's really efficient use of their time right now. They will finish the rest of this trash off and then move over to the Opera event. Now, it is important for those at home to know that Necrotic is a particularly daunting affix for the tank. What it does is it adds every successful melee will add a stack to the tank, decreasing the amount of healing they receive by 3% per stack, meaning that at 33% stacks, you're 99% unhealable. So eventually you will have to enter a more defensive state as a tank and start kiting with support of your teammates with either stuns or, of course, dropping that death and decay with that slow.
Of course, another death out of the tank over on Free Pumps. Perhaps this is why Gulch Trotters took them here. They maybe know that they're going to struggle for some reason here, which is weird to see Free Pumps. They looked so convincing in the previous dungeon. You would think that, you know, what could have possibly happened. There is, of course, the death doesn't look that bad, 4 to 6, but of course those 4 deaths by Gulch Trotters were all intentional deaths, and all 6 of those deaths by Free Pumps have been unintentional as they move into this Opera event.
Yeah, I mean, really a bit sloppy coming out of Free Pumps here, which surprises you because, as you mentioned right before this is a map that teams need to practice just in case they do get to that lower bracket round 1. Nonetheless, we will have to keep an eye on Free Pumps, but over on the left side here, all attention on Gulch Trotters as we do enter this not tyrannical, we are in a fortified dungeon, but this non-tyrannical version of Beauty and the Beast that we've seen a few times today already. But for those at home, there are 3 kind of kitchen appliances. Of course, a Kobold is a kitchen appliance that will need to be killed prior to getting access to Coggleston, the stove at the end. The order you kill them in is totally up to you, but you do have to bear in mind that every time you kill one of these appliances, all of them will heal to 100%. You have to restart that.
Yeah, so what's also kind of cool to see is that I believe this is a different kill count coming out of these Asian Pacific teams, or a kill order, I'm sorry, out of these Asian Pacific teams on this first boss compared to the NA teams we saw. We did see Bablet generally going down second. There is a death out of Dag P over on Gulch Trotters. They do have that B-Rose available to bring him up. Free Pumps did have another another wipe on the way to this first boss. They are having one heck of a time struggling to get over there.
I mean, Pumps is going to be locked away for a long time at this pace. Gulch Trotters. Now, we did have the death over from Deg. He did get caught by Babel at the Broom a couple of times. Severe sweep dusting over on Deg. Now, already chunked him for about 84% of the HP and then finished him off with one extra one. But we're about to have access to Cogleston. Now, Cogleston is a bit of a pain in the butt, so to speak, with this Necrotic Affix because he does summon forks. And those forks need to be killed quickly because you're having triple the amount of mobs applying necrotic stacks to the tank. So you want to make sure you AoE those quickly. When combined as well with the fact that he does a cast on the tank that increases the amount of damage you take, it could be quite daunting.
Yeah, so this Cogleston is really scary. You know, these forks, of course, are also going to allow some of these people to do more damage. We do see that Boomkin shoot up again, as he has done so many times in the previous dungeons whenever these trashes have additional mobs for him to deal with. Of course, this time, this damage is much more useful than previously because, like you said, the necrotic stacks that are applied from these boss mobs, these summoned boss mobs, are really scary. The DK might have to eventually start running away and kiting, but the boss does fall, so he's okay.
They put a fork in it indeed and start heading over to the backstage VIP area. Now, usually we see a huge pull here with the entire backstage and under the stage as well, as we do see the DK start to do this. Now, Blood DKs do have a couple of tips and tricks that they could do to kind of deal with these necrotic stacks. One of them is wearing their legendary cloak, doubling the duration of their anti-magic shell. As we see anti-magic shell popped up here, whether or not he's wearing it, we would have to double check. Something you can certainly equip and unequip on a per pack basis, but also something to note, and you mentioned in the last dungeon, Dancing Rune Weapon is an incredibly useful tool for these mass pulls in this dungeon, as it'll increase your parry chance by 30%. And what we mentioned earlier is that only successful melees apply necrotic to the tank. So mitigating and avoiding a lot of those melees in the first place will certainly kind of mitigate the amount of stacks going into the tank, making them easier to heal. Excellent pull there by Gulch Trotters.
This was a 24, and they did that pull extremely cleanly.
A 24 fortified.
24 fortified, exactly, right? And with the necrotic going on, while they're, of course, dodging these volcanoes, they are going to be pulling some ushers here. We did see a lot of struggle with these ushers earlier. Now, if these ushers get their casts off all together, like all 4 of them, there is the potential that these flashlights could kill you, even with your back turned. We do see one death grip going out to interrupt one of the flashlights to delay them. If they had gone off altogether, you know, especially if you're looking at them, you're gone.
Yeah, so really well done there to make sure that they stagger the flashlight cast. Big hit coming in here on the group again, making sure to stagger one more time. Eventually, they will likely pull the entire front stage area. I would take a gander at. Most teams usually do. But they're likely slowly pulling some of these ushers for the first 2 pairs to get some of their CDs ready. And now we're seeing one more time this mass pull coming in from Skylark, making sure as well he's going to have to use that AMS soon, getting that stun out as soon as possible. Ushers, unfortunately, cannot be hard CC'd, so some of those necrotic stacks will leak by default.
Yeah, so there are a lot of tools they have available. We do see a nice Typhoon knockback coming out of these guys to keep these mobs away from them. Doing a really good job. You see this Boomkin is doing a ton of AoE damage on this pack. Normally, you see the Windwalkers, Free Pumps has got another death on this boss. They're really having a hard time, you know, getting their feet on the ground at the start of this dungeon.
Yeah, I mean, they're really behind. They're at 60% now on Cogleston. We'll keep an eye on them, but a lot of the really scary pulls coming up for Free Pumps. Gulch Trotters has just gone through just no problem. They're looking excellent right now, so we'll see if Free Pumps can follow suit and 43% more on Cogleston. As the tank dip's quite low there, having some trouble catching up on the necrotic. We do see these a couple of those forks still living on Cogleston's side. Hopefully they're able to stabilize in just a moment. Only 2% on trash, whilst Gulch Trotters is already moving in this center foyer area. Deciding now, are we going to go over to Maiden, which it looks like is exactly what they're going to do. Usually a big pull coming up here as we see that Sky Step potion get popped right away, pulling all of this trash into Maiden's room and around the corner for that line of sight.
It's interesting to see them actually choose here to go to Maiden second, because with that remaining cooldown on that Bloodlust means that if they had decided to instead go to Moros, they would have very likely had it available for killing it. But perhaps they've decided that Maiden is a scarier boss, and maybe they might be, they could even be heading to Moros last. There is some deaths coming out. They
on the snake.
On the snake, right? You've got to watch out for those volcanoes. You know, you play with fire, you're going to get burned, right? They're doing a pretty good job. There are a couple of scary take mechanics also that players need to be aware of on this trash. You want to talk about that?
So yeah, I mean, the trash in general just, it does a ton of damage. There's a few debuffs that play together and can immediately one-shot you. One of the most dangerous, though, is that shield slam, which on live I love to point into the DPS and get them stunned, but it does do a frontal shockwave stun for 4 seconds. So, of course, anybody getting caught in that, especially the tank, is pretty much dead on the spot with the amount of trash that they pulled. Unfortunately, the Monk does get caught there, gets clipped. They don't have the battle res available, but they managed to clean up the trash and get the res up right away. Now, Maiden, a boss we've seen a few times today, Sours. Important mechanics, of course. The Maiden major mechanic that we really need to focus on is that combination of Consecration Dot leading into her Mass Repentance.
Yeah, so there is, the Dot as well as the Repentance, as well as several of the other casts that Maidens are going to do, need to be kicked whenever possible. Kicking, of course, as a Demon Hunter is going to give you additional resource to do more damage, and if for any player wearing Sefus, of course, that is a nice little pocket less to have available. Doing a really good job not letting any of these casts go off on Maiden. On 60%, Free Pumps is just cleaning up the trash below the stage. They have another death out on their team. They're really, it's good to see that they're still at it, right? When you're down like this on a map that you didn't pick and things aren't quite going your way, it's good to see the team, keep on trying at it. But Maiden is going down really smoothly for Gulch Trotters. That first Repentance going out, they're doing a nice job keeping everyone stable and at full health. Once they burn through the shield, of course, is a big kick that need to take care of. Otherwise, they're all going to die. Yeah,
and teams do well usually to try and delay the kick on that Holy Wrath for as long as possible, because the boss really isn't doing any mechanic in the meantime. You're delaying a lot of the timers to the next shield, and actually Gulch Trotters are in a really prime position right now to skip the second shield entirely. They got to 46% for the first shield, waited for that late kick. Technique's dipping a bit low, having an extra Consecrate debuff. I'm not really sure why. Might have gone out just a bit too far, but they do manage to heal him up. Another death coming over on Free Pump side as they've already moved upstairs past Opera. Now, if I'm not mistaken, they actually skipped some of the VIP trash in the back because they had 5% going down under the stage, so I'm not really sure how they managed past that trash. Nonetheless, that will be some percent they need to make up later. And as you're rightfully pointing out, another death going out on Free Pumps right now. I mean, things are just not looking great for them at the moment.
This is exactly what happened to Free Pumps, unfortunately, in that Pulse of Valor earlier, where they do a pretty okay job on trash. Of course, they did have one death on that Opera event, or on the bosses, but on trash, for some reason, they're really struggling to handle the trash. These flashlights going off are very scary. These volcanoes you have to watch out for. Of course, all the damage is completely avoidable. Maiden going down really cleanly by Gulch Trotters. Not a death in sight, and now they can head over. They've got just 2 bosses left, and Free Pumps is really in their dust at this point.
And I mean, not just that, but they also one-phased the boss. They only had to deal with that one shield, which is a huge time save, something that a lot of teams look forward to on things like Hellia, etc. Just skipping that one entirety of a transition phase is huge. As we see Skylar jump down, immediately pop that Sky Step pre-AMS to make sure none of those necrotic stacks are applying as he runs around the room, picks up the 3 Wardens along with all of the guests, and everyone's going to start DPSing these down as quick as possible, especially the guests, to really mitigate the kind of incoming necrotic stacks.
Yeah, so this room is really scary. There's a lot of dangerous abilities coming out, especially by these blueberries, as they're so aptly named. Of course, these skeletal waiters also have a very scary debuff that they'll be putting out on the tank that you have to be aware of. They're doing a really good job making sure to stay spread and avoid the swirlies on the ground that will, of course, kill them instantly. And, by staying spread, they're not going to be putting these circles on their friends, which could also do a ton of damage to their friends.
Yeah, those usually do a bit lighter damage, but certainly the swirlies are quite lethal. We do see that the Purgatory has procced over for Skylar. They run over immediately to the traps on the side of the room, getting ready to CC 2 of the dinner guests at Moreau's dinner party, which they're so rudely crashing right now. Usually we see Druger and Darius being CC'd, but in this case it was actually Darius and I believe, was it Crispin or Millstripe that they did?
I believe it was Crispin.
It was Crispin,
They've got Millstripe here in the fight. And now, something, of course, why we see teams CC these mobs is for each additional mob that is engaged with the boss, they will all do more damage and attack faster. And for some of those abilities, that is the exact opposite of what you want. That could very well spell disaster. They're doing a nice job throwing these Ghostbuster traps at these mobs and just making sure to kill. They've decided to kill Baron before Moros. You see, they're just cleaving off of the trash onto Moros. Now that since Baron has died, they have moved on to the Baroness, and they're doing a really clean job so far.
Yeah, and I'm glad they know who they're going to call. Now, this is a particularly dangerous boss here. I mean, in general, of course, 24, etc., but once again, with that necrotic affix, because you do have those dinner guests applying extra necrotic stacks to the tank, Chompy getting that first growth stack, as we've already kind of cycled through the immunity from Dag, which the healer is always the first person to get that growth. But we don't have Purgatory available for the DK, but again, fortunately, we do have a guaranteed reset on a 1-minute timer for the Blood DK if they are wearing that cloak, or if they can kite far enough and then pop their regular AMS with 5 seconds or less remaining on the necrotic. So everything's looking great and stable for them as we speak.
Yeah, so really excellently done from them. And what was actually very cool that Gulch Trotters did that we didn't see in some of the earlier dungeons is when Moros was at 75% health, they actually ripped down the 3rd ad so that they could take care of it before bringing Moros down to 50%. Of course, at 50% health, Moros will break all of those ghost traps traps out. You know, it's going to get quite spooky in there. And now that Crispin is here with none of his other friends, his cast is quite slow and it's very easy to move out of. Now, if a player does find themselves caught in that sparkle on the ground, they will be saying goodbye.
Yeah, and I'm liking the strategy here. I commented on this the first time they did it. They're kind of pulling Morose back and forth across the room and guaranteeing that they bait the frontal from Crispin on the Boomkin, who's kind of lagging just barely behind Crispin, making sure that the rest of the players don't have to worry about it. And as soon as that cast starts from Crispin Ference, the Moonkin just moves up, no problem, and gets ready for the next one. Really well done here by them as he punts it away and keeps it away from the group. Morose now at 14%. They're really not interested in killing Crispin at this point. There's no point. He will despawn the moment Morose dies anyways.
Yeah, they're showing a real mastery of this mechanic. Why kill Lord Crispin when you could just simply kill Morose and deal with Crispin's mechanic by using good positioning? You know, that 46% health remaining on him, that would have been wasted damage had they opted to kill him instead. Free Pumps they are looking just over halfway through on Maiden. Gulch Trotters is heading now down towards the attunement room. There's a little bit of trash here. Now they've only pulled some not very scary mobs. The mobs actually in the center of this courtyard room have a very, very hard-hitting Shadow Bolt volley, and they've done a good job to not accidentally face pull any of those.
Oh yeah, I mean on a 24 fortified, that's an immediate one-shot on the grip, certainly, and it has a huge amount of health, and some of the mobs it comes with end up healing as well, and it's just an absolute nightmare. Nothing you want to be dealing with. Free Pumps here has gotten through their first shield phase on Maiden, but it was well above the 50% mark, which leads me to believe that they will unfortunately have to deal with the second one. Seeing what was likely going to be a massive pull coming in here from Gulch Trotters, goes and tags Midnight right away. Midnight runs out and despawns, of course. The rest of the mobs are brought in, AoE gripped, immediately silenced with the beam because there's a lot of splash damage that goes out from these mobs, and everyone's going to pump as much damage as possible into them because right now it's definitely kill or be killed, especially we see that AMS come up, a lot of necrotic sags going out, and just lots of residual damage going out as we see a lot of the pulsing. Techniques get down to 1%. Chompy does go down. They do have the battle res available, but Skylar is just so far out of position right now, kiting these mobs around, that he's just not in range to get Chompy as he curls back around and grabs him.
You know, these fire circles are really, really scary, and especially if you were to cleave them onto a friend. They are going to be applying they are going to be doing a dot ticking damage onto their target before exploding. So it's important to keep them topped off so that the explosion doesn't kill them. Just one more boss left as we get into this full screen, and that Lust is available. So we're very likely to see Attument's going to jump off the horse, and they will be aiming for that one shot. And now another mechanic that this boss has is he's going to put out this spectral ghost on the back of one of the players. It's important. We haven't talked about this very much in the tournament, but communication is very important in these dungeons, and communication is especially important here against Attument, so that you can call out to your healer who has the debuff so that they can dispel you and get the dot off of the rest of the party.
Right, you are. Midnight now about to hit that 50% mark, and we're going to see Adaman get off his high horse in just a moment. We're entering now the second phase here, where the teams will Bloodlust and immediately get all of their damage and CDs out as quick as possible to make sure that Adaman does not remount Midnight, which occurs at midnight, healing up to 100%. Once they reach, I believe, the 20% threshold, something like that, Adaman will not remount regardless of Midnight healing up to 100%, so they're getting as much damage in as possible, avoiding that frontal on the Mortal Strike, which does decrease your maximum HP by 50% for 10 seconds. But the big one to really focus on is the Shared Suffering, which unfortunately hits as Midnight charges through and finishes off techniques. Does not have a battle res available to them, but they're well beyond the threshold for Adam and should be having easy access to Midnight, getting that 100% damage taken and damage done buff, so they should be able to close this out easily.
Now they just have to kill Midnight left, and now Midnight, once Adaman's dead, he will just stomp, and each time he stomps, the next Mighty Stomp that he casts will do more damage. If this was a tyrannical setting, it could get very scary, but of course it is just that fortified, so they're doing nice. We see just how far behind Free Pumps is. They haven't even cleared the trash to be able to engage with Moros. They've got 19 deaths. Really good showing from Gulch Trotters here.
I mean, not to beat a dead horse right now, but Free Pumps really just having not the best dungeon, 19 wipes. It's almost like, I mean, Rob, we talked about this earlier, but, they came out of that DHT looking so solid, and it's kind of, they just reverted to some of the sloppiness that we saw in the Free Marcy series earlier.
For sure, and obviously when you look at how do you win a series in the MDI, right? The strategy is obviously you are gunning for that first map win, especially when you know what the map's going to be, and you prepare a pocket pick to basically get on the third. And I'm not excusing Free Pump's play there. That was just being fair. That was just bad. Then again, 24 necrotic, fortified, certainly nothing to sneeze at. But you have to think Free Pumps was kind of going in there like, we have a plan, we're going to get a third map. Now, if they don't execute on that, certainly there's going to be some flags that kind of raise up. And obviously the fact you have to go into lower Karazhan anyway, it means you probably should have practiced that a little bit more. But I'm going to go ahead and on good faith here say Free Pumps probably has a plan, and this kind of behavior, though, won't get them win against Free Marcy, let alone teams in the global LAN.
Yep. I mean, it was just a great performance out of Gulch.
Yep.
And Gulch did lose the first map, but again, just barely. I mean, you know, it was a close map. They lost it. They performed really well on it. So we're going to see how this counter pick kind of shapes up from both of the teams here. But Gulch Trotters is, you know, we keep referring to some teams kind of do a practice where they only practice the maps that they end up counter picking. They rely heavily on that first win. Gulch Trotters is really starting to strike me as a team that is just well-rounded, has any map under their belt, and they're ready for anything that's going to be thrown at them.
Yeah, I very much said this in the beginning of the second map, and I stand by it. I think these teams are very evenly matched, and even though you can look at that and say, well, Free Pumps just frankly kind of phoned that one in, which is what it felt like, especially from the beginning. They just looked lost the second they got into that dungeon. I still maintain that these teams are really close, and I am excited about this third map, and I really still believe it's absolutely anyone else's series. And again, the hope is that whichever team advances, they're going to take the time to kind of clean up that play and make sure they're going in and they're doing it the right way.
Yeah, so really the pressure's on right now. Just one dungeon left, but that's going to be determining which team goes home and which team will be proceeding to the global LAN. Of course, going to that global LAN, you know, it's not as nearly as stressful as a situation once they get there as it is here in the lower bracket. You know, they will have to face Free Marcy, who's looked absolutely terrifying up until this point, but first or second is much like less of a weight on your shoulders than third, right? You don't want to be the team in third place. We have seen a lot of teams, you know, really kind of almost slack off in the second pick. You know, they know that their team comp is good for map 1 and they know it's good for map 3, so they let map 2 come along and, you know, they're saying, okay, this one's our mulligan, we're going to give this one to them, and then we're going to gamble that we're the better team for the third map pick. So we'll have to see what that actually ends up happening.
Yeah, we'll have to see if Free Pump's gamble does pay off, if their strategy is going to see them through. Again, one map going to decide so much in Asia Pacific. Which team joins Free Marcy at that global LAN? Will it be Free Pump? Will it be Gulch Trotters? We will find out on the other side of this break. For Asia Pacific, it all comes down to this final map. Who will be joining Free Marcy at the global end? We're going to find out. We are heading to Court of Stars. The affix is, unsurprisingly to me, Volcanic again. Volcanic, kind of that wet noodle affix you just largely ignore. But Court of Stars, 24 tyrannical. This is no joke whatsoever. We have seen other teams go to Court of Stars. Salute, what are you expecting to see in terms of how people approach the polls?
I mean, you know, we were talking about it earlier during the DHT as well. This is another one of those bosses in the dungeons that people are like, uh-oh, Tyrannical Melander is the last boss. I mean, their damage just ramps up so much for the course of those slicing maelstorms. But, you know, one pull I'm going to expect to see that we kind of saw very popularized in the method, well, the method series, but also the EU regional last week, was really that pull with Talixay, where you kind of get to skip one of the enforcers. And the trick really here is to kind of pull Talixay along with the last lieutenant, the Fel Lord, all the way out of the room towards the harbor. She despawns, but we don't have the lieutenant despawning. So what happens is you kind of get a freebie. You don't have to kill that enforcer, which just takes so long to kill, especially you got to pull them alone. You got to constantly LOS to stay alive. And it just saves a huge amount of time.
All right, we're almost ready to hop in. I'm going to put you both on the spot. Who takes the series home? Sours, I already asked him a question. Start with you.
I thought you meant Sours takes it home.
Oh, hopefully not me, right? But for Free Pumps, you know, this is their map pick, so they're probably showing some confidence here that, hey, we know you guys have put in a ton of time practicing. You know, they probably have been, you know, spamming /who over on those servers to see what dungeons these teams are in, and maybe they know that, oh, we've put in a ton of time into court, and these guys, maybe they haven't put in quite nearly as much, so they think it's their dungeon. You know, they're going to have to show it here. This is their map pick.
All right, Sloot.
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to go with, you know, the kind of trend that we usually see. I'm going to agree here. It is their map pick. You know, they want to have the counter or the comfort pick here, and we do oftentimes see that the third pick going in after the team has won that first map is in favor of the team picking the third map. So I'm going to go with them so much that, you know what, if they lose, I'll shave my head.
Bold call from you. I'm actually going to say Gulch Trotters. They've looked incredibly consistent throughout this series. They haven't necessarily had that wide range in terms of how they perform, and I think they're feeling it right now. I think they're on a kick. So, you know what? I'm gonna meet you there. If Gulch Trotters loses, I too will shave my head. So, gentlemen's agreement.
That's a bald call from you as well.
Bald call. Let's hop into the match again. This decides everything for Asia Pacific. Things are going to start off on a romantic little boat ride, but I promise they're going to go 0 to 100 real quick.
Rob, you know, one day I fantasize about us taking a similar gondola ride through the Court of Stars little ravine area. Sours, you know, I would love to have one with you as well, but Rob and I have just been planning this for so long. But we do have a nice bit of time to kind of talk about this dungeon, break down some of these early pulls, because we will just see players taking this ride through. What I do expect, of course, to see out of both teams right off the bat is skipping that very first guard. There's just no point bringing them along. Huge amounts of health, so we'll likely see that in prison coming out of Gulch Trotters, and likely a repentance from Free Pumps Sups.
Of course, there are lots of ways that you can CC mobs to skip them. If you are a hunter and you can throw a freezing trap at a mob, of course, freezing trap will not prevent combat from face pulling, so you can run into the mob and then let your team through. As long as nobody casts abilities, you can feign death afterwards and drop combat. The same thing will apply to other abilities like Paralyze. You know, you'll have to just play around with CCs and see what works out. But skipping that mob, of course, is very important. Otherwise, he's going to spam some slams on the ground and very slowly chase after you for the rest of the dungeon, and you really just don't want him to come up from behind you.
And they just have so much health compared to some of the other standard mobs in this dungeon. Now, of course, we are in the teaming kind of affix here, so we will have some extra trash that the players will need to chew through. Not only are there more mobs present in the dungeon in the teaming affix, but you do also need to kill a higher amount of trash in order to succeed. Of course, we have the kind of wet noodle affix, as Rob so aptly called it, with Volcanic. Players just got to watch their feet, making sure that they're not getting hit by any of that. We see that immediate Agrimar's Trinket come up on the pull from Skylar there. It's about a 20 to 25 million absorb, depending on the eye level of it. A huge absorb, just because those scouts throwing out the torches right away just do such an immense amount of damage that it's actually quite easy for tanks to get one shot if they don't have any form of substantial mitigation up on pull.
Yeah, it's also very important that as a DPS, you don't want to be the one who engages those first. Otherwise, they will throw that torch at you. And you see just how much damage it does there to Skylark, bringing him down like to 30% health from that torch. If you're a DPS player and that torch hits you, you are gone. It's going to be lights out for you.
Yeah, you're absolutely right about that. Free Pumps moving just a bit earlier. We see a similar pull from both teams here as they kind of weave through the middle of the court, leading up to the bridge to the patrol captain. Free Pumps doing it just a bit faster, getting everything down as quickly as possible. possible. And I believe they actually pulled the Construct pack as well in front of the Patrol Captain, which they did. So they have free access to that, getting ready and moving over to turn off some of these towers as to have less of the ads spawn during the boss encounter, Sours.
Yeah, so these ads are going to come out and be quite a hindrance on the team. They will, of course, cast Hinder on the players, and, you know, that will be
aptly named.
Yeah, and so you definitely don't want that going on you. And, you know, the boss is going to be putting out a Street Sweep laser that we see going here for free pumps, as well as a bow tie. And if you stand in either of these mechanics, you will be gone. You have to be careful of the Street Sweeper. Of course, the visual, you know, you need to watch out for it. And then also the other ability that he puts out is this jump ability. And if you're a class like a Paladin, or maybe you're a Windwalker with your Tiger's Lust, or any other class with some sort of freedom, instead of jumping, you can simply freedom yourself to remove that dot from you.
Right, sure. And of course, you can dispel it as well. It is a magic effect, so oftentimes you will see the healer dispelling one of the range so that they don't have to jump around aimlessly and lose a bunch of damage. The melee can jump and not lose any substantial amount of damage, along with the tank as well. But if you do have those tools available, why not use them to your advantage? Patrol Captain down to 62% already in favor of free pumps. Similar trash percentage for both teams, and as I say that, actually, Gulch Trotter skyrocketing up to 40%, killing that last contract on top of the boss, but still faring a fair bit behind free pumps in terms of boss damage. We do know, of course, the Flask of Eternal Night is accessible to both of these teams. Do not need that alchemy, and it does not need to be a rogue in this case, meaning that the boss at 25% will RP and die.
That is, of course, something different about Court of Stars here on the tournament realm compared to on live servers, where the only clickable in the entire dungeon is going to be that Poison Flask. And so what Free Pumps has done now is they've actually pulled, there's a trash pack to the left of the staircase as you exit the room with a lot of mana worms as well as a caster, and they have brought that into the boss fight with them, so to gain a little bit of health, a little bit of kill percent while cleaving off of the boss. You know, everything from this guy is fairly long cast time and really well telegraphed, so teams don't have to worry about that many things. All they've got to do is get him to that 20%, and then we'll see if these teams go their separate ways to start the RP as well as clear up some trash around the docks.
So we do see Patrol Captain getting down to 24% here, going and taking a fatal swig of that flask. Now, likely we're going to see a backdoor strategy here coming out of free pumps, which is pretty typical for teams these days. We're going to have likely Sups lift the healer, running all the way around, starting the RP as the remaining 4 members of the team curl around to the back door. That will open only once that RP is started. Here we see Sups, already with that Skystep potion going out. The rest of the team, now we see teams do one of two things here. They either just kind of wait, or they actually go and try to 4-man the harbor without the healer. A bit scary in a 24 setting, perhaps not something we'll see out of them, but Subs does start the event, immediately dies because when you res, there's the checkpoint right there. The rest of the team's waiting, and did indeed pull a bit of trash in the meantime.
There was a death in the meantime, of course, coming out of Gulch Trotters on that Demon Hunter. Demon Hunter is a class that is very exciting here in Court of Stars, where they are able to use their ability to see where the mob is hidden in that Guess Who game. And what's cool about that is if Gulch Trotters decides not to get 100% kill count, they can actually send that Demon Hunter off to solo. Of course, Arfuzu dies from free pumps, then followed quickly by Sups as well as Vanch. You know, this is not what you want to see. Of course, this is that teaming setting, so there's a lot of mobs here that are very dangerous.
I mean, those Inquisitors are just an absolute nightmare to deal with, getting a lot of those eye casts out. There's the Imps in there as well. If those Imps mass cast on anybody, the Fireball or any of the Dread Inferno, it's going to be absolutely lethal. A couple more deaths coming in on the board from the Imps there. Really just a mass amount of damage. 7 deaths on the board now. Subs dipping really low. LC base barely holding on. Arsfu barely holding on. A lot of healing needed to come out. They're starting to stabilize a bit, but we still have Inquisitors at 30% health. Mistresses spike damaging with 25% MS debuff on the tank. Managed to finally stabilize. There is the huge hit that I was talking about on the tank. Down to 1% right now. Barely holding on for dear life, but does ultimately go down as the rest of the trash goes down. Fortunately, the checkpoint is really close, which is what allowed them to kind of corpse run and finish off the rest of the pack, but really not a very clean performance there.
Yeah, you really never want to have to corpse run a pool like that. Once your cooldowns are popped, they're not going to come back once you're popped right onto that ground. So by dying once that pool starts, it goes that much slower, and then each death is going to cost you. Now they've got 6 additional deaths on the board compared to Gulch Trotters, so they're 30 seconds behind. Gulch Trotters has engaged the first mini boss. Imakacha is out.
Please don't. Oh, I'm sorry, that's the name of the boss. Yes,
of course. So yeah, Amakacha is going to come out, and she's got a little cleave ability around her. You want to make sure that you stand out of range of the circle. It's quite small, so you can still often melee her without being hit by it. She's not going to be very dangerous, but Skylark is, of course, bringing the mob over here to clear some more trash. They have pulled the Inquisitor. The impact is here, so now nobody was doing a lot of damage until now, and we see the numbers shoot up. They've been holding their cooldowns for this pool really well done.
I mean, absolutely imperative that they get a good interrupt rotation going on. The beam is really useful here from Chompy. Something, you know, a beam and the AoE silence that we see from Vengeance Demon Hunters in these dungeons play a really big role in Mythic Plus, much more than raiding than we often allude to. I mean, that 8 seconds mass silence on those imps, absolutely crucial. Do well to finish off the pack there, and Amakachi is already low enough that they're starting to move over. Now, the entire reason that you saw this entire kite across the dungeon is for max efficiency. By the time they get here, Amakachi's about to be killed, about dead. The Enforcer spawned on the unfortunate other side of the bridge, so they wanted to make sure they get here in time and not waste too much time traveling. Free Pumps on the right side of the screen working to pull a similar impact as well.
Yeah, so Free Pumps is doing this impact pull all by itself, whereas Gulch Trotters was able to turn, of course, that mini boss, and then they chained it into a patrol, and then they changed it into a second patrol, and then while Amakacha still had not died, they had an enforcer spawn over here, so they were able to grab him, bring him into the pool, keep the train going. You know, they've got a lot of momentum going into this map. They're looking really, really good right now.
Yeah, I mean, choo-choo all aboard. Free Pumps, unfortunately, the last time I looked over, I think they had 8 or 9 deaths. They've now entered the double digits in 14. Just a sloppy performance. I mean, again, coming out of them. This is their map pick. They do have a good strategy about what they're doing, clearly, but unfortunately just too many spot deaths and a few wipes along the way. Gulch Trotters moving over now with that second mini-boss. We see the eyeball boss spawn and move over. Now, this one is probably the most dangerous and the biggest pain in the butt of the 3 bosses, as he does do that channeled beam on a player. You can actually line of sight that beam, but you have to do it before the cast goes out, before the channel starts. Otherwise, he will grab you, add 5 stacks to you that not only slow you, but decrease your damage done by 5% per stack. Certainly not something that a DPS wants on them.
Yeah, you know, ideally it will go on the healer or the tank every time. Unfortunately, it did go out on that Boomkin, and you see it's really hurt his damage quite a lot. He had to sit in bear form so that it didn't kill him, and he wasn't able to do any damage during that time. He was taking quite a lot of damage. Here comes the next disintegration. It is, of course, onto the tank this time, so they are still able to get full effective DPS onto him, while Free Pumps is just barely engaging Amakacha, a full mini-boss behind with this Watcher here on like 60% health. Really, really good.
A full 60-second difference in terms of deaths between the two teams. That's a huge mountain to climb. Not only are they behind in terms of raw percentage in the dungeon, progression in the dungeon, but then an extra 60 seconds. They really have their work cut out for them, but we're far from being finished with this dungeon. A lot of damage coming in there on techniques, managed to stay alive, well healed through it. Finishing off Balgar here. Now, this is where we're going to see, if they do decide to do it, that trick with pulling Talixay outside of this area, despawning the boss, and having access to the third Fellord without ever having to deal with the third Enforcer. Now, it's important to note here, and it's well done by them, pulling this mini-boss away from any potential Enforcer spawns. The last thing you want is that Enforcer in one of those 4 random positions spawning right on top of you, and there goes your little trick.
Yeah, we did see a couple of unfortunate Enforcer spawns earlier where a team was engaging one of these mini-bosses and the Enforcer popped up right on top of them, and then any chance they had was totally wiped away. Of course, we see another death coming out of Free Pumps, this time on the Windwalker. This is, you know, something that is just really sad. You know, these guys have put in so much time in the tournament. Everything is falling apart right now for them. But of course, the all-stars of this dungeon are yet to come. It is going to be Talixay Flame Wreath as well as the final boss here. They could very easily wipe the team, and then that's a huge time loss and then a very long run back.
Yeah, but everything's just looking in favor of Gulch Trotters right now. They execute very well. The rest of the trash here pulling the entire harbor up to that third general that spawns. They're really harboring in the doom of 4 free pumps right now. They will get that 100%. They will finish off the third general and avoid that last Enforcer. They'll have their work cut out for them with Talixay, of course, but after that, they have an even further smaller advantage that you mentioned earlier with that Demon Hunter and that Spectral Sight, being able to pinpoint that demon amongst all of the guests with that Guess Who game. So everything's looking in favor of Gulch Trotters. They're just really performing well here. Nice clean pull for them. Free Pumps just now working on that second mini boss.
Yeah, so now Gulch Trotters has got this guy. They are quite far away, of course, from Talixay. So they are looking to, it looks like, kite him back towards it. You know, while you're killing this guy, there's no reason why you can't be dragging this little guy around. You know, get some effective movement out while doing damage. Now, not all of these are mobile damage dealing classes. The Boomkin will be losing a little bit here from this movement, but for these melee players, it's not a problem at all. This guy isn't very scary, just a very small frontal cone, while Free Pumps is, you know, quite a deal behind.
I mean, net efficiency certainly is in favor of moving that mob over to Talixay. They do have 40 seconds on Bloodlust, though I do very sincerely believe that they will be saving it for Melandris, the most dangerous boss of all three in this dungeon. They are ready to pull Talixay here and do so immediately. Now, name of the game on this boss is that she will about every 20 seconds spawn a pack of 5 imps, similar to the ones in the trash packs that we saw. It's absolutely important that you interrupt them immediately and keep them locked down because they do the same cast as the trash mobs that we saw earlier, doing a ton of damage to the group. Not to mention our increasing damage aura throughout the fight. That's particularly dangerous, Sours.
Yeah, it's important that we see, you know, good cooldown rotation. We saw, it looks like, a Demon Hunter Metamorphosis into I-Beam on this first set of imps, as well as Windwalker popping off. Druid hasn't done very much damage yet, so perhaps he's saving damage for that next set of imps. You know, if you fall behind on those guys, it's bad. Another death from the Windwalker over on the side of Free Pumps. You know, it's not looking so good for them. I don't think Pumps is going to be freed at this rate.
No, not at all. And the problem is they have their battle res down, and they're actually having a full wipe right now. The reason they couldn't, we weren't seeing the res come up is because once you pull one of those mini bosses from Talixay, they're considered a boss, and you cannot res when you die once a boss has been actively pulled. So full wipe coming out of Free Pumps there, entering the double digits right now. Gulch Trotters looking fantastic. Talixay at 57% right now, well cycling their CC and CDs on those imps as they spawn, making sure that every pack is well dealt with and dies quickly as well. Withering Soul being constantly interrupted. Don't want that max health reduction on the team, especially with this ramping AoE dot.
You know, there's a lot of people who see this and they can't believe this has happened. Gulch Trotters is the one with the full screen. These guys have been playing out of their minds so far in this dungeon. You know, Talixay on 30, just 37%. A Solar Beam coming out on these imps. Now they're not going to be scary at all. Another Blood Elf Silence to make sure that these imps stay locked down. Doing a good job keeping everything under control. Now, the damage from this boss is going to be ramping up progressively as the fight continues. And so that's why we see Dag has not done very much damage. But you see it affected in everyone's health. You know, all of a sudden, everyone's kind of low. Boom, full health. The healer is getting ready. They're on top of it. You know, he's doing a good job stabilizing everybody on like 50% mana. Really excellent healer play and really excellent gameplay all around from these guys. Yeah,
it's looking really good. I mean, the dot is starting to ramp pretty nasty. People are chunking for about 30 to 40% of their max HP. Doing really well there to bait all of those kind of fire zones together. That is where the imps spawn from, and each player is targeted with one of those, which is why you're seeing the players group up together, baiting all of those zones on the ground and then moving out of it. Talixay now at 5% HP, about to fall here, after which the team will very cleverly disguise themselves as a Nightborn and get ready to enter the main building of the Court of Stars to find the evil lurking demon.
Yeah, we are entering the dinner party now, and we saw some very fancy footwork coming out of the Gulch Trotters there, making sure to keep those imps spawning nice and close together. You know, you do want to do that. It will allow them to be killed much more efficiently by that melee cleave as opposed to spread range dotting. You know, melee cleave will be superior at the end of the day, and you know, they do have, of course, the Gore Fiends and several other tools for bringing in an imp in the event that it gets separated from the group, but by staying well coordinated and staying together, you know, really clean fight.
We do see, unfortunately, that there's another 4 deaths on the board for Free Pump, so further difficulties on their part. Now, in order for Spectral Sight to actually work on the Havoc Demon Hunter's part here, they do need to get all 5 clues immediately. So they run around, grab all 5 clues as quickly as possible. Demon Hunter pops that Spectral Sight, sees one of the guests outlined in red, and immediately talks to them as the group runs over to the balcony that they go to, which will, spoilers chat, will be revealed as a Dreadlord in fact, and they will get ready to nuke it down immediately.
So yeah, this guy is of course not Jaina, but we saw that they have been working out. They earlier in the week we saw if you got one of these bottom enforcers, they like to take a nice leisurely stroll, but this guy has a much faster trot up to here. You know, they have been, you know, hitting that treadmill, and he is here transformed into this vile demon. You got to be careful of the Shadow Bolt volley. Now it's not really scary. You see, it does a lot of damage, and it's going to put out a debuff on the team that will make the next Shadow Bolt volley do additional damage. But but as long as you're not standing at a variable distance from the boss, then you will never get a second stack. Now, if the first Shadow Bolt volley hits you when you're, say, out of the room, then that debuff application will be late, and then it won't fall off by the time the next Shadow Bolt volley comes in. So by making sure to stand in close and stay at a good range, this mob isn't scary at all.
Yeah, so nothing too scary here. Just making sure that the tank avoids that frontal Carrion Storm as well. Getting the Freedom or the Dispel on the debuff from the magic debuff, of course, from the mob, as well as it will decrease your strength by 50%. Certainly don't want that on the tank. They want to output as much damage as possible too. We'll be going down here in a moment. The key will spawn, grabbing the key, and then they'll have access to Melandris, the last boss. Now, Cyrus, this is the boss that, you know, he's the Shade of Xavius MVP of this dungeon. Really scary. Nothing too crazy at the start, but will ramp up in damage significantly as the fight goes on account of those images spawning, which increase the damage of that Slicing Maelstrom.
Free Pumps is almost done with Alexei. They did lose subs on 6% health. Hopefully, of course, the Windwalker dies following it. Everyone's getting really low. The Lock Healthstone's back up to full. Rogue pops cheat death. He's looking very unhealthy, you know, but 1% health, they should be able to squeeze it out. But of course, 26 deaths to 2. They are 1 minute and 20 seconds behind. They are 120 seconds behind. Two full minutes, right? This is, you know, this is Gulch Trotters' game.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good update to have over there on the side of Free Pumps, and knowing that they're, you know, at least succeeding with that boss, getting upstairs. But I mean, they're just so ahead at this point, Gulch Trotters. They finally start off on Melandris. Immediately that Bloodlust comes up, want to get as much front-loaded damage as they can. And now, the way the mechanics work on this boss is that he will do that kind of Blade Flurry charge at a target. You want to make, at the furthest target away from him, you want to make sure that you're piling all those images together, as you see Chompy well doing there. That way you concentrate all of the lines for the piercing gales that come out, making it very easy to dodge. We can see the players here just easily sidestepping. And you also have a concentrated area where you make sure that you never go near during the Slicing Maelstrom, because not only does the Slicing Maelstrom do a huge amount of damage on the group, but it's actually exacerbated if you're too close to an image. We can kind of see those little circles forming around them. If you're within that area, you're actually taking extra damage on top of it.
Yeah, we saw Chompy have really good positioning in the previous dungeon when they were dealing with Moros. And again, we see just how well all of these mobs are stacked over here. As long as you know, you stand at that range for the charge, he's going to charge out at you with that Blade Surge. He's going to drop a Ghost right there, and then you can just walk away and then, you know, bide your time, and then you can walk back there. Those mobs are so well stacked, and once they get to 5, they're going to start despawning. So they're going to stay at 5. So the amount of damage that's being done by this this piercing gale on everyone isn't ever going to get scarier than it is right now. So it's up to Dag to make sure he knows how to use all of his healing abilities properly, so that he can keep his team alive. Otherwise, you know, this boss could very easily kill a member. But they do have 2 battle reses available, as well as 2 battle res classes. So, you know, tech goes down. They may need to battle res him. You know, that's, you know, you don't want to be the guy, but
like a snake out of the grass, Techniques does come back up with that battle res, immediately rejoins the fight, and they do have 1 battle res left on the board right now. Now, I mean, we have reached that cap damage for the Slicing Maelstrom, but it's really scary. They do have some support in the form that I wouldn't be shocked to see if Dag was, of course, wearing Cephas right now, opting that the tank runs into one of the whirlwinds right before it does proc that Purgatory on the Blood DK. Technique staying alive as well. No more casualties there, but Chompy also gets clipped by that Blade Surge charge from the boss. So things are looking a bit sour for them right now, sorry to say. But a lot of damage coming out. They do have that 1 battle res to fall back on. Unfortunately, spawn one of the spirits in a not very ideal situation right now. And here comes the next Slicing Maelstrom. Everybody needs to make sure that they stay nice and healthy, using health pots if they need. And of course, there is that rotational support. You know, every other, we're going to have a rotation of either Cephas or consumption from that Blood DK.
So now Free Pumps has engaged Advisor just now. Of course, they do have that full 26 deaths compared to 3. There is, you know, always that chance that something terrible happens to the Gulch Trotters, and they could, in theory, lose, because they've spent a significant amount of time getting the boss down here to 21%. They do have, of course, 2 battle reses available again, but looking pretty clean. You know, as long as, you know, they can keep their cool, you know, stay calm under pressure, they should be all right on this guy.
As long as they don't get blown away by this heavy wind, it should be okay. I mean, it is totally within the realm of possibility that Gulch Trotters wipes 3 more times here, and you know, Free Pumps does take the match, but I mean, it's going to take a lot. Even with the run back, there's a 23 death difference between the 2 teams. Advisor Melandris now dropping into the single digits of percentage left. 9%, they're clearly stabilized. Well, long ago, they reached the cap of peak damage on that Slicing Maelstrom. They seem to stabilize after a couple of small hiccups here, and they're looking primed to really finish this series 2-1 and go over to the first ever global LAN.
Yeah.
Mr. Rob.
Let's let him finish. Let's make sure, obviously, we want to cross our...
Advisor Melandra
There's
said
a death.
1%. We have a death on
All
the
right,
board.
all right.
My name's Rich Campbell.
Okay. something, Rich Campbell. You, sir, owe me a shaved head.
I did it during the match.
Good on you, man.
Thanks.
I always love it when you make a friendly wager and people stick to it. But this is